right, everyone, welcome back. Hope you're all a little more relaxed, took care of what you needed to take care of. I'm excited about this segment and what we're going to do here. This is a panel. We're actually going to just keep this here, questions that I've got for them. I'm actually going to have them have some questions for each other. This is going to be very raw. There's no preparation to this. They have no idea what's going to be asked of them. I want this to be real and sincere, right? So we have entered a brand new world. These are participants in this brand new world. They're all trailblazers. They are doing things that have never been done before. And they're doing it, for the most part, on their own. They're making their own decisions as they go forward. This has never happened before. These independent voices within a framework of faithful following Latter-day Saints and an audience that just grows and grows and grows and grows. And so I want to talk a little bit about that struggle, a little bit about that newness that is happening here amongst all of us, but especially with the podcasters. And as they blaze these trails, what are some of the obstacles that they are going through? Cardinellis here at the end, right? He is probably the largest target of ire for anti-Mormons. So imagine yourself,
many Mormons.
So imagine setting yourself up in a position where you're the target, and you've got the biggest names of anti-Mormonism, plus all the mobs coming after you on a continual basis. Jacob, I'm skipping over to here, very similar. Standing out, I can't imagine going out into a debate where in some sense you're representing the church, or at least the members of the church, the ideas and theology of the church, in front of what will end up being millions of people. Think about that, right? And so, especially the three of us right here who have been very early on in this, speaking on cultural issues, controversial issues. I think on Quick Media, we were the first to 10, 20, 30, 40, not quite 50, I think, 1,000 subscribers covering these types of issues on YouTube. What do you do? I'm standing alone in this sometimes early on thinking, who do I talk to about this? I've got BYU angry at me. I've got Deseret Book angry at me. I've got people angry at me several of us, probably all of us have heard that are you trying to, what is the term, straighten the arc?
Steady the arc?
Steady the arc, there it is. Steady the arc. I'm like, oh, am I doing something wrong? Do I be quiet about this? You're not the church. Paul Brothers, you're not the church. Why are you coming up and talking about this as more of an independent voice? Those were early on. These things were coming up all the time. How do you navigate that? How do you walk through that? But at the same time, you're receiving these positive messages of individuals that are, look, you're helping me. You've changed my life. I have stayed in the church. Right? This is all brand new. It's all brand new, so I want to talk about this a little bit. I want to start with Jacob on this, and I want to ask the question of how do you navigate all of the different feedback that you receive in being in a position as being a faithful member of the church, wanting to represent well, but at the same time having an independent voice?
I would say that one thing I remember, one of the heroes of my kind of process of development and coming into all this was Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson kind of blazed a trail, and he had a thing that he would say, tell the truth. And I've just sort of had that as a mantra, that I'm just going to tell the truth. I'm actually a big fan of that new movie that's come out, Truth and Treason, with Helmut Hubner, that hero, and it's sort of you do what is right and let the consequence follow. Actually, the thing that scares me the most in everything that I do, and why I always kind of put that disclaimer out there to everyone, is like, if I say something stupid, or I get my butt kicked in a debate or something like that, I just want people not to put too much stake on me, all right? I'm going to do my best, but I'm a human like like anybody else, and I want to be very clear. I don't officially represent the church. I'm a Latter-day Saint who is going to go out and articulate the things that mostly are almost always from other people in the church. I'm just articulating those ideas. So that helps me because ultimately I want people to know that I'm not, like, I don't represent the church, and also I'm not even usually presenting my arguments. I'm presenting things that people like Neil and Jasmine and other people that do deeper scholarship have done work on. So that kind of helps.
With the opposition, do you ever get down?
Yes, when it comes from inside the walls of the church, meaning from other members who kind of do it. But I don't know. Maybe I'm a psychopath or something. I also recognize that the people that usually are upset are the people that I expect to be upset, and that to a certain extent, it's like when you speak the truth, it divides people. And if you're dividing people up around what's true, and you're sure that it's true, like I stick with that.
Greg, can I ask Jacob a question?
Yeah.
Oh, boy,
What? I'm just curious. Of all of the controversies, of all of the videos that you've done that have ruffled feathers, have there ever been one, or at what point in your YouTube career have you been like the closest to being like, maybe I should be done with this. I'm tired of this.
I don't think any of the videos that I have done or the things that I have done have generated, well, early on, there were voices, and there weren't a lot of them, but there were some that kind of were like, who are you? And I'm kind of like, I know, who am I, and why am I the one who's out doing these things? Like, I don't feel like I'm the person that's the brightest in the room. And so that gave me some consternation, but it was basically I went out and did things that I guess are kind of crazy, and it went well, and then all of a sudden there was this overwhelming support, and it was like all of a sudden the people who maybe were looking sideways like, who the heck is this guy, all of a sudden they were like, hey, that was actually really cool what you did. And it was like, oh. That was probably the point, kind of early on. It's kind of like, who am I getting into this space? And I mean, I still kind of feel that way, but I've had enough things that have gone well, and I've learned, to your point, that you tell the truth. If something's true, and you know that it's true, and it's not just that, and you can actually make the argument why it's true, then do it. And don't care about the naysayers.
You've got something to stand on.
Yeah, like I don't tend to care too much about what other people think. I care what the Lord thinks, and if I'm being true to Him, His gospel, and to the church, because I believe that this institution is fundamentally what it claims to be.
I think that you have to have. I think you have to have, my wife will attest to this, I think you have to have very thick skin to do what we're doing up here. You're putting yourself out into the world. There's always going to be opposition and adversity that you're facing. And to some degree, you have to be a little bit of a psychopath because you have to be able to say, I don't care. I don't care what people say. I do not care what they're saying. And I think some of those voices might die down, or they'll be codified into, this is this segment, this is this segment, more and more as this online world develops. Cardin, two things. How do you navigate being a faithful, sustaining member of the church with an independent voice, your very independent voice, and still keep yourself in a position where you're like, okay, I am sustaining, but I'm covering these controversial issues. Maybe we haven't heard this from the pulpit, but I'm covering this controversial issue. And secondly, how do you handle the opposition that you receive, very much so as a target?
Okay,
from
I can
one
only
side
do
or the
one
other?
question at once. Just what's the first one? I've already forgot the first one. What's the first one?
How do you handle being a faithful, sustaining member of the church, but having an independent voice?
Okay. You mean how do I still maintain my temple recommend when I go on record as saying the biggest dereliction of duty of the 21st century in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is not having social media for young men until February of 2024?
Perfect.
Oh,
You
okay.
get Austin Falter on air with a little chart that he flips every time he goes against the church office building.
Actually, it's very simple. By a function of volume, in my presentation, one of the things I'm going to talk about is anti-Mormonism, and you have to define it. And there's a difference between somebody like Joe Rogan, who occasionally cracks jokes about Mormonism because it comes up naturally in a conversation, and somebody like John DeLynn, whose entire channel is dedicated to it. I'm very aware that when you criticize, it's easier to make a criticism than it is to build things, and I'm I'm much more patient and respectful of builders, such as Brigham Young and other controversial figures in our church history. So I try and make sure that just by sheer volume, if I am going to launch a critique, that I make sure that I give a lot of praise, somewhere to the tune of 3 or 4 or 5 to 1, so that anybody that watches more than one episode of mine knows that I'm not just a critic of the church. So I think sometimes it's really just a vibe that is subjective based upon what volume you put out.
Secondly, how do you handle being the target because of what you talk about so much and the battle that you're in as an apologist? How do you handle the mob online?
How do you handle the mob online? Not very well. That peacemaker talk. I'm taking baby steps on. But let me see, how do you handle it? Actually, it kind of varies by day, and like anybody that says just don't, it's easy when your friends are going through it to say don't let the comments get you down. But I think all of us on stage have had times and specific instances where it has actually greatly and deeply affected us. I think all of us would agree that the worst haters and the most annoying ones that are the most difficult to emotionally get over are actually from within the church. That's probably the biggest disappointment when people don't recognize what you're trying to do or the positive impact you're having. So I don't have a hard and fast answer because every situation is different, but I can tell you that there's some things that consistently work. Relying on friends as sounding boards that you trust, and it is a huge one. And I think that's one of the biggest benefits of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, is in an increasingly digitized world where things are mechanized and automated, and this thing called social media that was meant to bring us together has strangely actually made us drift apart. I have friends that I haven't seen since college, 15, 20 years ago, and I've seen the births of all their children. I've seen all of their Christmas cards. I've seen so much, but I haven't had a face-to-face interaction with them, so that when I do meet them, their children view me as a stranger, and they haven't really seen me in a long time. So one of the best things about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is it forces us to have human interactions, whether it's people in our ward every Sunday, or whether it's things like this with Go and Do Travel. We're inspired to meet other people, and then when we use those people as a sounding board, I think that's probably the single best coping mechanism anybody, not just podcasters, but anybody has for anything, is developing relationships of trust with people you trust, so that when you need their help, you can rely on it.
Can I make one quick comment on this? Because we talk about this sort of hearing critique from inside. Jasmine, I absolutely loved what you were saying in your presentation about the need for critique. I actually value critique. Critique actually, when it's done right, it's great. It helps me to make sure that I'm not being stupid. It's when the critique that's coming isn't sort of like constructive criticism from inside the church of, hey, we agree with your mission, we love what you're doing, but this was off, or why don't we think about this, or let's change things up. It's instead just like, you're an idiot, shut up, what are you saying? And it's very public and very kind of against it. So I think that the friendly fire issue in the church, not every critique is friendly fire, but also sometimes it's just friendly fire. And I think that the more that we as Latter-day Saints unite, recognize that we have the same goals, but then work together to try and help each other be more effective in achieving that goal in a constructive way, I think that helps us all. But the ones that hurt is when people don't do that.
Sometimes you just have to tell people to go pound sand. Like, there just does reach a point where, like, I'm sorry, I've done the 3 nice things, like WWJD, WW Jasmine Rappley, WW Jacob Hansen, and then, like, when it doesn't work out, just, like, go pound sand, bro, and move on.
We all get there. We all get there. My rule is I actually don't care what anybody says until they put words in my mouth. You're putting words in my mouth, and you're saying something like, oh, you're saying that, we're in an apostasy, or you're whatever it might be. If you're putting words in my mouth or you're lying about what I said, that's kind of where I have a problem, and my wife has to tell me to remove my comments back. All right. Paul Brothers. You guys, there's 2 of you. You can handle 2 questions at a time.
I think so.
Okay.
Hey, you remember the first one, I'll do the second.
Okay. So, you guys, everybody likes you.
This is not true.
Come on, come on. Come on, everybody likes you. No, you guys have had amazing success. You guys are the ones why I don't know if I hit 50,000 first or not, because I wasn't paying attention, and then all of a sudden I look and you guys are blowing right by. And you're still going like crazy. What kind of opposition have you faced with the audience, if any, because everybody likes you, right? And secondly, what do you think the key is to your success in blowing up so much?
So I think one big opposition, at least at the beginning, I'll say, a critique, talking about this critique thing. When we started the channel, we would get comments when we were doing interviews like, hey, the one with the brown hair needs to let the guest talk more. And I'm just like really excited. I love dialogue. I love talking. I love share. The way I learn is by speaking out loud. And so it's how I'm working out my ideas. But I took that, and at first it's kind of like you have that initial thought. It's like, hey, well, it's my channel. I can also talk as much as I want. But the more I was thinking about it, the more I'm just like, I'm doing this channel not for me, just me. I am doing it partly for me because I want to learn, but I'm doing it to help other people learn as well. And so if I'm sitting here talking when I had this awesome guest on, that the reason I invited them on is because they're smarter than me, then I should shut up. And so I did. I started to shut up more. Those comments stopped, and I noticed that people were listening more. People were subscribing more. And so I'm not one of those people that's like, you need to listen to every single comment or anything. But if you see something consistently happening in your comments, and you take a little bite of humble pie, and you really think about it, then a lot of times that will help you steer you in a better direction. And I will say, I have become a better listener, and because of that, I feel like I'm learning more. And so, I think the biggest obstacle during this whole thing of doing the Stick of Joseph has always been us. It's us not being good enough and trying to work with each other. And it's also nice being with your brother, because your brother can just speak straight up to you, and that's really nice. So what about you, Jack?
No, what's been really interesting, and I kind of talked about this in the VIP Q&A, but engaging with these people that come at us very hot in the comments, and the things that hurt the most, like everyone's saying, is people that are on the same team, are Latter-day Saints, and are coming at us in the comments. But I wanted to share one experience that is literally my favorite interaction that we've had with someone that's commented on our show before. So they comment on one of Dave's videos talking about the Deuteronomists, and this is what he says. He says, I love you, but you need to stop publicly preaching this false doctrine of so-called Deuteronomists corrupting the Old Testament. This is not doctrine. Mike Day and Dave Butler's evidence for their wild claims is woefully insufficient. The Old Testament is reliable as Scripture. Josiah and Hezekiah were good kings who listened to the word of the Lord and did as the Lord's chosen prophet told them. There was no cabal of evildoers who edited Jesus and Heavenly Mother out of the Old Testament. These things you are parroting are simply not true. I firmly believe that although your intentions are good, these ideas that are being spread around the LDS podcaster space by Dave Butler is aiding Satan's cause by causing thousands and thousands of people to lose faith in the Old Testament as scripture and distract them from more important matters by shifting their focus to looking for evidence of Deuteronomists and their corruptions. It's almost over, 1 second. The theory is fundamentally faulty. It begins with a false premise and seeks evidence to prove that premise. It is unfalsifiable because it claims the Old Testament is an untrustworthy source. This isn't science. This isn't a sound theory. It is false. It just isn't so. Please stop spreading these ideas. So that was pretty fiery, right? And this dude is pretty sure. He's saying absolutes all over the place. Dave is aiding in Satan's cause, okay? That's what he says. So then what do? Same thing I do with all of these negative comments that we get. Type out what I want to say naturally, show it to my brother, we laugh about it, and then I delete it. And then I type out something like, thank you so much for coming and watching the video and leaving a comment. I'd love to hear more about what you have to say. Email me here and let's have a conversation. This guy, he actually followed up on this, emailed me. I sent him my phone number. Hayden and I got on a call with him. And within 7 minutes and 30 seconds, I took a screenshot. Within 7 minutes and 30 seconds of just articulating what Dave's premise is and some scriptures in Deuteronomy to back it up, this guy literally said, well, maybe I'm mistaken. And so you see these wild comments. It's like literally Dave is aiding in Satan's cause to then 7.5 minutes later, yeah, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm completely wrong. And so you just have to take all these things that people say with a grain of salt and realize even people on the same team have their own pet projects, their pet, things that they've studied. Not to say that there's never been anything incorrect that's been said on the stick of Joseph. There's been
many things, yeah.
And I think we'd be the first, and especially like Dave and all these other guys, Mike Day, they'd be the first ones to say that they are not perfect and they have a lot of theories. But I think the overwhelming effect of the channel has been a net positive on sparking people's curiosity to further dive into the scriptures and appreciate the doctrine of the restored gospel.
Yeah, and to answer your second question, why do we think it has been successful? I think that the main reason it's been successful is because we try to have an openness. Now, one of my favorite quotes, though, is you have an open mind, but not so open that your brain falls out. You know what I mean? Like, because that can happen. We've had people on where, you've seen probably 75% of the videos that we've recorded. We've recorded episodes that at the end we're just like, oh, this is going to get lost. Oh, no, the SD card's going to delete this on accident. You know what I mean? Where you're just like, yeah, I'm sorry, we're not going to post that, right? But I think overall, it's become a place, and the end of our every single episode we say, and remember, stay curious and hungry, because to me that is the origin of the restoration of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. That is the beginning of the path that leads to eternal life. It's being curious. Who am I? Where did I come from? Where am I going? And then being hungry enough to pursue that until you find an answer.
So bringing up these ideas sometimes that people have studied in the scriptures, some people have a scholarly background, sometimes they don't. You feel typically, as you filter through them, again, you're not always right, they're not always right, that at a minimum, it is providing an excitement and an interest and a curiosity for your audience to delve more into the gospel topics and the scriptures. Is that correct?
Yeah, and that's what we want. We want people to turn off YouTube, and that's a new thing we've been saying before at the end of every video now, is turn off YouTube,
now that you've watched
open
us.
Your scriptures. Yeah. And so that's really what we're going for. And we have been wrong. But Jasmine, those gold plates, they were real, okay?
I don't know about that, guys.
Okay. Well, now I'm going to move in a different direction here, but than I had planned, because I want to dovetail into this with Dave Butler. Then, Dave, in the same sense that this is a trailblazing medium and time that we're in here, and there is navigating a lot of different things that you have to do in terms of what is the truth, what is not the truth, what is scholarly, what is not scholarly. How do you navigate your scripture study, your books, what you produce, what you say online on podcasts, etc., looking at academia and scholarship as compared to your own study and what you've learned and putting that out there? Do you have certain checks in your mind on, well, I got to check this, I got to check this, or are you just all out, this looks amazing?
What an interesting question. So, first of all, I want to comment on the setup here. I'm conscious that everybody else got to introduce themselves, and I remain wrapped in mystery. Which means that some of you showed up yesterday going, I don't know who this Dave guy is, we'll see what he says. And you might feel like it was kind of a lot. Even before I used the technical archaeologist vocabulary. So I want to say two things to you. One, I'm sorry. And two, I'm going to do it again tomorrow. Thank you. So it's interesting that, on the subject of the Deuteronomic reform, right? This is not my theory, right? Not only is it not my theory, it's so ubiquitous in modern scholarship that it is obviously a theory. It's not a fact, but it's so ubiquitous. It's sort of like the theory of evolution in a biology department. And I understand that some of us fundamentally believe all the scriptures are inerrant, okay? I personally, first of all, that's not our doctrine. The Book of Mormon eschews its own inerrancy and warns that the Bible is corrupted, okay? Joseph was right. I actually don't think a belief in the inerrancy of the Bible can survive a real encounter with the Bible. So what do you do about that? Well, one thing you can do is retreat and put your head in the sand and say, nope, Scripture's inerrant. I don't care if it has two different verses that say different people killed Goliath of Gath, whose spear is thick as a weaver's beam. It's still inerrant. There were two guys named Goliath of Gath, right? And if Judges said that Yahweh sent an evil spirit to cause war, I guess he did, right? That's one option. Another option that Nibley warned us against decades ago is just accepting the conclusions of critical scholars. And that's also a problem. So what do you do? What do you do? I think the answer is that it behooves us to look at scholarship of all kinds, but to look at it critically, to say, okay, what are the facts this scholar is trying to explain? What is her hypothesis? What kinds of arguments is she making? Do I have data she doesn't? How does this fit into the data that I have through, e.g., the Book of Mormon, right? And to intelligently benefit from critical scholarship without simply saying, oh my gosh, right? Whatever, Wellhausen said this about the book of Leviticus, it's all false, or whatever. So I actually think the stuff with Mike Day has been amazing. I don't know, have any of you seen any of the Mike and Dave read books episodes? Yeah, so he's a seminary teacher. I'm a science fiction writer, okay? We're just two 50-some-year-old guys. And we'll sit down and read something like Moshe Weinfeld's Deuteronomy and the Deuteronomic Reform, okay, or Robertson Smith or Wellhausen or whatever, and we'll do an hour-long episode and say, look, here's this book, here's the hypothesis, here's what he's trying to figure out, here's what he says. Here's a few super interesting points you might want to think about, right?
But you get two dumb guys that are asking questions, trying to like understand.
And we have two really good-looking guys. We like lure them into their seats with mirrors. We're like, look at you. You are so good-looking. Yeah.
Why did we become this? Why did this become our thing? What? We just showed up here.
It's the curse of beauty, Jackson. Enjoy it while it plagues you. And I think that's amazing. I think it's amazing. 30,000 people will watch us talk about Julius Wellhausen and the, documentary hypothesis or whatever. And I think, look, the people who are designing the curriculum for the church, they're trying, it's just like public school. They're trying to catch everybody, okay? So they're aiming for somebody who's basically literate but not especially sophisticated and maybe new to the church. Right? And people are left with hunger. And, I think that the fact that 30,000 people will watch me and Mike talk about something like that means that they feel like we're positive, that we're showing them things that are interesting, that are building their testimony.
Awesome. What we've heard so far is there's kind of this, again, there's this conflict, right? Two different forces. There's an understanding of what we have, what many people might have doctrinally, or their level of understanding of the church, and sometimes things are being brought up, and they're like, oh, that doesn't fit in the narrative that I had thought of, right? So you have to work with that. You have to try and build bridges to try and teach things that are maybe a little bit more than the meat, because the church's job is to give the milk. Right? And sometimes there's a little meat behind that. And in order to have a curiosity for that, you have to dangle the meat out a little bit to be able to find that. Similarly, for decades, maybe centuries, we would not talk about the temple. There was no talk about the temple. Oh, you can't bring that up at all. There's nothing in the temple you can say. People go in completely blind still today, not knowing what in the world they're about to do, right? I speak to a number of people that are in their 70s, 80s. They go through the washing and anointing and the ceremony, the endowment ceremony. They're like, I have no idea. My father-in-law went to the temple for the first time, and he was done, right? Jasmine, do you have any pushback at all when you talk about the temple, and how do you manage what you talk about? And is there pushback on, well, you're not supposed to speak on these things?
I get some pushback. I used to get it more often earlier on. Like in 2019, Elder Bednar gave a great talk talking about what we can and can't talk about, and then in a couple years later, the church finally put the covenants in the handbook, and so it was publicly available in a more upfront, but especially before the covenants were in the handbook, I'd get more frequent pushback about, I don't know, I don't feel comfortable about you talking about this, I don't think you should talk about this. And I would take those very seriously because I take my temple covenants very seriously. But the reality is that even before the church published the covenants in the handbook, they've been published in the Holiness to the Lord booklet, even though it maybe isn't as obvious, and it was in James Talmage's book. And so, it's been out there, though it's not as in the forefront. But for me, it's always okay, am I following Elder Bednar's counsel? Did I describe or disclose anything I specifically promised not to reveal? And did I tie it back to Jesus Christ or the doctrines and principles of the gospel in some way? And I often, my favorite way to talk about the temple is to make sure I'm framing it with either scripture or something in the ancient world, because it's not against the rules to talk about what's in the scriptures. It's not against the rules to talk about coronation ceremonies. And so just using those as framing devices to say this is something that happens in scripture, and hey, we do something similar in the temple, and just kind of allow people to make the connections for themselves.
Do you ever, I've talked about the temple sometimes, and one thing I've found is I think that I might work more with the Spirit on a regular basis when I'm talking about the temple than any other time. because I don't, if I'm talking about it, and maybe you have the same experience, I'm wondering, it's like, did I go too far on this? Did I say something I shouldn't say? Am I not being reverent enough about this? Do you have that experience at all?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have had the stuff that I've made that I never ended up publishing because I realized when I recorded it, like, I probably got too close to a line, or I'll get feedback from other people if I have any questions to like family and friends I trust saying, hey, what do you think about this? Did that make you uncomfortable? Like, what do you think about like crossing the line? And I've gotten great feedback from, on both sides, like, no, that was totally fine, or I don't know about that, Jasmine. And then I usually take that very seriously. And so there's plenty of things that have just stayed on the shelf until I figure out a different way to articulate it in a way that is more appropriate.
Yeah, that's the key. Okay. David Boyce, you have a very public story. You have tens of thousands of people, maybe hundreds of thousands at this point, that have seen your story publicly, moving from, okay, I'm checking out mostly these Protestant churches. You go all over the place, you do everything, but moving from becoming a Protestant to becoming a member of the church in a very, very public fashion. Right? That is not something many people experience. Tell us a little bit more about that, and were you, that is blazing a trail in and of itself. Was there pushback with you? Did you have any experience on comments, family members, et cetera, that you're willing to disclose in making that conversion?
Yeah, it's interesting because like when you are looking into the church, I showed the one kind of like graph where when I was entering into this, I was getting the pro LDS kind of content and the anti. And I think one thing that happens when you do start investigating the church and you go on YouTube, like, and I'm sure all of you have seen this, is if you are with the way that the TikTok algorithm works and Instagram, like you're seeing a lot of negative content out there from the antis. So there is just no way
We're
to
drowning
avoid
in
that.
it.
Right. So it was in a weird way as I was preparing for the temple, like, because I would see, some of the anti-stuff in relation to the temple. And in a weird kind of way, just for me personally, it was very discouraging because it was, they would play like, the Halloween haunted music in some of the videos, or would try and freak you out. And I think one thing I had seen like in the evangelical YouTube space was it had converted to sensationalism. Some of the most, like I remember, and I did an episode with Cardin on this, was one Christian YouTuber who I just absolutely just so respected, was just so good, and he just would tackle questions that may not get the views, but they were extremely helpful. But then he converted to the sensationalism where it's like, oh, let's find false prophets with this pastor, and this pastor, and this pastor. So when I started off my YouTube channel, like I was being influenced by that. So worst church experience, that was one of my top evergreen type of videos for a while. And yet at the same point, it was just one of those things, especially as I would consume some of the anti-content, was just like, I don't see Christ in this. Like, and then I would see, Midnight Mormons, and then I would see Scripture Central, and I would see Saints Unscripted, and I would see Quick Media. And it was just different kind of ways where it was reassuring to see that people had a shield in the YouTube space for this. And it was interesting because I went, when I was in Utah, the day after I attended the Manti, Utah temple, I want to be a little bit of a church traveler, a little bit of a church historian. So I went to the very first anti-Mormon Protestant church in Utah, First Congregational Church. And I can't remember the preacher's name, but like he formed the church and just would have these fiery anti-Mormon type of sermons. And that was a whole different thing, but he would just keep going and going and going with that. And over time, that church attendance dwindled. And people just got sick of it. So it does make me wonder with the way that things are on YouTube, because we are seeing so many good channels, so many good Instagram accounts, so many good newcomers in the TikTok world that are defending the faith and defending the restored gospel. And with that first anti-Mormon Protestant church, when I went there, they were great. but I could tell like it was a hospice church. it was on its last legs, and they had like the building is gone. They're doing services in the basement of an Episcopal church that's nearby. So it does make me wonder, as Zion rises, if we will see a dip in that kind of anti-content, because eventually the sensationalism, that's going to get old at some point. And
Can I ask a follow-up question? You're going to hate me for this, but we're all dying to know. So how is LDS dating like as such a public LDS influencer?
You dog.
I mean, I feel like no one else in the church has that description of being such a public LDS influencer convert. That's got to be hard.
And such a
52
good-
dates in 52 weeks. Is that
I'm sorry.
Who's got a hot friend for David Boyce?
Yeah.
Who's got a hot friend?
Most eligible bachelor.
this is where
I will do a live stream. We will rate them on a scale of 1 to 10. Personality and looks, 17 and above, you're in.
this is where the blushing just starts to take over.
I'm sorry.
But no, dating's been interesting. Utah County, so not only new to the church, but also new to Utah dating culture. It's a process. We'll put it that way.
God bless.
Okay, awesome. One of the things I love about podcasters, YouTubers in this space is I think that there's a feeling of a mantle that you have when you're looking at current events, when you're looking out at certain ideologies that are creeping into the church or in the culture more broadly, and how you address that. You have a feeling of a need to address it and talk about it. And I think this is one of the greatest assets for this medium, is because we usually don't talk about these things. We don't talk about them in Sunday school. We don't talk about them in Relief Society or Elders Quorum, rarely ever from the pulpit. But here is a medium where you actually can articulate these things, and things that you're thinking about, someone's actually saying, right? So I want to give an example of this and talk about one specific subject that is occurring right now. And if this flows into something else, this is wide open for everybody, and we can move to a couple of different topics if we have the time here. But I want to talk about, how do you feel, for example, how do you respond spiritually, emotionally, for example, to the idea that, as we know from statistics, that all of a sudden men are starting to go a little bit more to church, right? Young men. And I don't know if any of you have noticed this in your wards. We have single men with their kids in church.
Based.
Right? Yeah, married men sitting in the pews with their kids, right? You never used to see this before. There is a drop, I'm going to say church-wide, throughout Christianity in women attending church, right? So it's just like, what is happening? Something is flipping here, and this is a social pattern, a trend that is happening, and how do you address that? And do you feel a need to address it, to talk about it?
Could I, on that subject?
That's a surprise.
No. Well, there's one thing. Actually, Carden, hanging out with Carden. So we're in Carden's studio, and they're with Jonah Barnes, and I'm there with Carden, and I'm there with Brad, and there's this energy. I recently went for the first time to Kirtland, Ohio, and I went into the School of the Prophets room in the back of the Whitney store, and it was like I was thinking about the people that went into that room, and it's the funniest thing. It's like the those of you who've been there, it's like this back room. It's like a closet back there. But the people that went into that room, Brigham Young, and I don't know if John Taylor was, but probably around that time, but Wilford Woodruff, and these different people who, in that room are some of the people that just did the most incredible things. And I thought, what was the environment in that room like? And I couldn't help but think, when I'm in Carden's studio with these guys, that there's this excitement. there's this feeling that we can do something. We have momentum, and we can actually impact people's lives. And it is exciting. And there's this thing that's like, we're not going to play defense anymore. Let's go play offense. And when I went back and I read things like The Key to the Science of Theology by Parley Pratt, someone who was in the School of the Prophets, and I'm like, dude, this guy's not playing defense. He's playing offense. And again, there was this energy and this excitement. And I think, especially for young men, they've been through sort of the new atheist movement. I think they look around and are like, man, our world has gotten so weird. And there's been a move back to say, well, Jordan Peterson, someone who's influenced me a lot, and he's kind of called out to young men and said, look, your civilization, you as young men and men in general, have a calling and a duty to propagate into the future, is built on this sort of religious foundation, and you should not be ashamed of that. And so it's been really cool to see that movement just generally in society to a certain extent, but even within the church, and to see the young men stepping up, and now there's all these new channels and people doing it, and Hayden Carroll's doing new things, and it's like, and it's super, super exciting. So on one hand, I'm super optimistic and excited about the future and this energy, but there's another side that, yes, when it comes to the women in the church, it is rather scary, and those ideologies that are out there that kind of need to be addressed. And for me, I'm sort of like, I don't know how to reach, a young woman with my sort of content. It's almost like I feel like someone else has to step into that space.
Yeah, I think directly with your question, and I'll try to be as succinct and articulate as I can, but men have been asleep spiritually for decades. And what is happening and what we're seeing, there was a study, I think it was in Europe somewhere, and I don't have the numbers, I'm just going to say the basic topics. But essentially what they found is that households where just the man was faithful and a churchgoer, the children had a higher likelihood of keeping that faith into their life and their generation. If just the woman was, then it was the lowest. If it was the woman and the man, it was the medium. But for some reason, if the woman wasn't interested in religion, but the man was, that was actually the highest likelihood of children, which is very interesting. One of the reasons why they believe that is the case is because biologically, children look at their father as what you do when you grow up, and they look at their mother as what you do when you're a kid, right? Because of the nurturing aspect and the role that women play in nurturing their children. So what happens is if only the woman is interested in religion, they subconsciously put religion with kid stuff. And then you grow up in atheism, secularism, that's what adults do, right? So I do that as a backdrop because right now I think the pendulum is swinging. We saw the millennial generation, this huge kind of throwing away the traditions of the good traditions of their fathers in regard to religion. And it's because men were asleep at the wheel and women were the only ones standing stalwart. But now we're seeing how women are also now leaving, and now it's time for men to stand up and then women back up together and us be one with each other. But I think that if a man is asleep at the wheel spiritually, it hurts his family more than we can even know. It hurts his wife, it hurts his children. And so men need to wake up, read your scriptures on your own, set up family prayer, not because your wife says, hey, I think we should do family prayer. You should be the one saying, let's do family prayer, and take control of the spiritual life of your family next to your wife, all in one step. But I think for the last 20, 30, 40 years, women have had to drag men to go to their church meetings, to say their family prayers, and to read family scripture. And we're at the point where that has to die, or this church is going to die.
Jasmine, I'm curious from your perspective
Yes.
of the statistics of women, like from your perspective, why do you think that's happening?
Well, I'm no sociological expert, but I do think that third wave feminism has disenfranchised men from many aspects of society. And so when the men feel disenfranchised and alienated, well, the only place left to go is church. And I think there's no better structure for investing in the development, emotional, spiritual, physical development of men than religious upbringing personally. And the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, obviously, I think does this really well. And women benefit the most when men have strong spiritual and emotional development. And so women benefit from the strong development of men. So I'm really optimistic about the fact that a lot of men are returning to church. I think it's going to have a net positive impact. But I'm very sad about the fact that women in so many cases have been sold a lie that their worth is tied to certain hierarchies and structures of power that they feel like they can't find in a church setting. Like, oh, I'm not getting ordained to offices like elder or priest or whatever. But there is nothing more empowering than becoming a king and queen, priest and priestess in God's kingdom. And I feel like if women understood the doctrine, there's nothing more empowering than working together towards salvation. And so I'm optimistic also that we're seeing more Latter-day Saint female creators come out. Right now, they're still mostly in the cultural sphere. There are very few doing like historical apologetics, but most of them are doing like garment girly stuff or modest fashion, and maybe you poo-poo that
garment
stuff,
girls.
but I think it is so important to have those positive role models. I would have loved to have a garment girly when I was a teenager, feeling awkward and uncool because I was dressing modestly. If I had a role model showing me like you can be cool to be a Latter-day Saint, you can keep your covenants, that would have made such a difference for me. So I think we're gonna see more positive ripple effects from the fact that other women are starting to find their voice online.
Okay.
Boom.
All right, guys, we've got a hard out on this. I wish we had hours to do this. I think many people would just stay in their seats to listen to this for hours. But big, huge round of applause for the bravery and for the sacrifice and for the testimonies of all those up here on the stage.
I like you. You get a free t-shirt. You stood up. And you weren't just leaving.
He knows
It
how to
doesn't
work the
count
crowd.
anymore. You don't get a free t-shirt. Sit down.